there was a statue of a Confederate general, Robert E. Lee, was taken down. Where exactly was it?
Sure. Oh, was it Richmond? I thought, okay.
But where in Richmond? Was it at the State House? Or just, is it in just sort of some type of like a generic location in Richmond, Virginia? Look, if you live in New York, every day.
It's Charlottesville, Virginia's Market Street Park.
Sure. Okay. Charlottesville, Virginia. If you live in New York every day, not every day, but many days, you walk through New York City and you see that they have destroyed history and they have replaced it. They've replaced it with another building. The change in New York City over the past 25 years has been extraordinary. Buildings that were there for 100 years, more torn down, replaced with, frankly, in my opinion, very often less attractive buildings. Much less character, no history. Just here, around the corner from where we are, there's still only one building left that was associated with the Underground Railroad. And then, and buildings that were right next to it were, replaced it with like some crappy hotel, prefab building. That's what happens in a society. Does it happen with statues? Of course, all the time. People become less relevant, or society starts to question like the premise behind why is this symbol important for us to go by? Why was it here in the first place? Is it relevant today? And is it in fact wrong today? I don't know when this particular statue was put up, but if I had to guess, it was between the 1907 and 1925.
The statue was commissioned in 1917 and dedicated in 1924.
So, and how do I know that? Is simply because this was the pushback following Reconstruction, where there was an attempt by white people to reassert and reinterpret the Confederacy. And meanwhile, who better to comment on this type of thing than the Pope of the Jews, Ben Shapiro? Here it is.
So my view is that the statue should remain, and we should discuss the statue in all of its complexity and all of its nuance. Okay, however, that's really not my issue here. My issue is what we replace things with, what we replace American history with, what we replace that discussion with, and what we have decided to replace the discussion of American history with.
Pause it. Statues are not history.
They're a discussion in a sort of way.
The statues are not history. They are assertions. They are attempts to define what history was. History exists outside of statues. And in this instance, that statue was in fact a way to obscure the history of the United States. It was obscuring it. It was obscuring history, and it was an attempt to impose a reality and a future that was based on an ideology. Statues are ideological. They are not reflections of history. They are attempts to remind people of certain things that happened in the past and in certain ways that reflect society's values or how people want society's values to be. They're not history. And if you're talking about like, well, but they're conversation starters. There's a lot of different ways you could start the conversation of the Civil War. But continue.
So my view is that the statue should remain, and we should discuss the statue in all of its complexity and all of its nuance. Okay, however, that's really not my issue here. My issue is what we replace things with, what we replace American history with, what we replace that discussion with, and what we have decided to replace the discussion of American history with, what we have decided to replace our own history with, is a perverse, simplified wokeness that does spell the end of America in pretty much all of its forms. Not the getting rid of the Robert E. Lee statue per se, but what we are replacing it with. And what I mean here is that there was a time capsule that was buried under the Robert E. Lee statue in the base of the statue. We're now replacing it. Okay, this is the part that's kind of astonishing. And also, the imagery that was associated with the removal of the Robert E. Lee statue. Right? If you're going to remove the iconography of the past, it should be done in a sort of, I would say, solemn fashion. It should be done very seriously. Instead, the Robert E. Lee statue was removed to the wild celebration of a crowd below, as though they were toppling a statue of Saddam Hussein or something. Robert E. Lee does not preside over the country, nor did he ever preside over the country per se, right? He was the general of the Confederacy, the Confederacy was defeated between 1861 and 1865. And you saw one of the people who was taking this thing down, who'd been tasked with taking this down, putting up the Black Lives Matter fist as this was taken down. Now, you can say that maybe the statue should be taken down, but replacing it with the ideology of Black Lives Matter, which is that America is invariably racist, not only conflicts with the actual imagery, which is a black man taking down a statue of a Confederate general, which does not bespeak the white supremacy of the United States in 2021, but also Black Lives Matter is pushed and based on a lie. The lie that black Americans are immutably stricken by the American systems of power. That it's the same sort of rationale as critical race theory, Black Lives Matter. That if you're a black person in America, you live with the boot of America on your throat all day long. That obviously is not true. I mean, we're literally taking down statues right now, right, that offend people. But that sort of imagery is telling.
Stop. But it's like, yeah, first off, I can't. This feels like one of those days where it's like, I didn't do my homework and I'm coming in and I'm just rambling. He is arguing that the fact that there's a guy giving the Black Power sign is an indication of that we are not immutably subject to white supremacy, which I would agree is the case. But in fact, it is achieving exactly what you say you're implying should be achieved and can be achieved in America. Well, this is it, man. It's happening. Like, and is the job done? No. But we're doing a little bit of cleanup right now.
It's funny that he brings up the Saddam instance himself, because that's exactly what these things are. Like,
totally.
These are just like really old Saddam statues, except to Confederates.
Exactly. And taking it down is in fact a small, tiny step towards both acknowledging that the values that raised that statue were wrong, that the statue's continued existence imparts values that we as a society have evolved past. We haven't necessarily reached full evolvement yet. And then, like I saw somebody on Twitter, I can't remember which right winger it was, like, name one policy that's improved from this. You know what? Give me another freaking 10 or 15 years. And maybe we'll start to see some policies when people don't walk by a statue and think like, oh, what could have been wrong about the Confederacy that we would venerate the guy who led it?
I think that this conversation is developing to the point that we're starting to remove these things actually is a sign of like this sort of policy improving society somewhat. And
here he is going like, BLM says that America is immutably oppressing black people. Well, dude, no. Actually, when we take those statues down, we're showing that there is at least a tiny bit of mutability. And it also expresses the idea that, like, there's more mutability that can be had. And so, in fact, no. If BLM's ideology was that America is immutable, they wouldn't be doing this.
Yeah, and it's not about essences, it's about systems.
Exactly. And the idea that America is unchangeably white supremacist, a white supremacist society would mean that there was absolutely no point to take down the statue,
right,
and no point to protest.
That it's invariably white supremacist. Yeah, actually, if you look at most historians of race, they outline that actually racism has gotten worse, particularly as capitalism developed as a rationale to, justify taking from people and force them to do labor.
And we can see that there is an ebb and flow. That's why I can guess without any basis other than just knowing our history when that statue went up.
they'd rather turn it into like that sort of philosophical about immutable oppression rather than just a historical one about who put these up and for what.
Exactly. It just sounds to me like he hadn't done his homework that day.
Folks, there's more of what you've just saw where that came from. That's if you hit the subscribe and like button. Thank you. Really, thank you.